Go. Welcome back. We're learning the Nefesh HaHaim. We are in Sha'ar Dalet, Perek 22, Chaf Beis. We're talking about the skulas, the power of Limud Torah. A person learns Torah, it's with him in this world and the next. And now a little bit on the downside about what happens if we don't, or we're going to see even if our learning is lackadaisical, lazy, or not with our full koyach. So that's what he says. Ve'im chas v'shalom, anachnu oiskim ba. We're oiskim b'Torah, but berifyon. So kaviyachol mismait shefa haor elyon v'kolo elamois kol echad lefi erko. So that's one of the themes we've seen throughout the Nefesh HaChaim, is that we're connected to God, and we're in the control room, where the actions, the thoughts, the words, and the actions of every Jew have impact on all the olamos, all the worlds on high. And when we do a mitzvah, we even think about doing a mitzvah, we say words of Torah. So this increases the amount of light in the world. It increases the connection with the Creator. And here we're learning, if one, on the contrary, doesn't learn or even learns, but rifyon, okay, rifyon weekly and so forth, so that is mismaid, it decreases the influx of energy, of light that comes into all the worlds. And again, how much impact does each person have? It's according to each person, and people are on different levels, um, based on a lot of things, what they've done so far in their life, and where they're holding. But everybody has impact. So if one is learning Torah, but berifyon, so then it doesn't have the same power, it decreases the light. Okay. Let's see, where did I go? Okay. I'll put English here also. Okay. Okay. Okay, so it's important that our learning is right-handed and with all our koyach, and that's what keeps the influx of divine energy coming into the world. So, oh, okay. If we're learning Torah about berifyom kaviyachom ismait shefa or elyom koloilamo kolecha lefi erko. V'mistarim tivken nafsho yizbar kaviyach. It causes God to cry in hiding. Kmoshe Amru Razal and Chagiga. There are three that HaKadosh Baruch Hu boicha leim. V'chashiv chad minhon ami she'efsher lo lasik b'Torah ve'enu oisek. So there's a list of three that causes God to cry, as it were, and one of them is a person who could learn Torah but fails to do so. V'chein amru sham gimel demos halalu lama. Why? There are three tiers. What are these tiers about? Good evening, Jay. Welcome. Nice to have you
Good
with us.
evening. Good.
V'ikadamri achat al bittul Torah. So again, this is causing divine sadness. The person who's failing to learn or not learning properly. V'oy lo leben. So woe to the son who causes father to cry. Hamayrid demos aviv b'kol yoim. Ve'inyan zoysa b'chia. What does it mean, divine sadness, God crying? It's hard. It's a hard metaphor to understand. You cry when, you don't get your way, or you can't see how to continue given the circumstances. So how could that happen to the omnipotent God that he would cry? So, of course, it's a figure of speech to a certain degree, but it's teaching us about this connection between, here it's talking about God the Father and the Jew as his son, and so woe to the son that's causing his father to cry. The Inyan Zota Bechiyahu, his Gabrus Hadin. It's talking about accumulation of the divine attribute of justice. Behismatu Sha'ar elyon shema rachmim agdolim boilamos anistarim. So important ideas that we know at all times that in order to sustain the creation, God is sending down Shefa. He's sending down divine light and energy, and that's called Or Harachamim. And if a person is not doing his fair share of learning Torah to the best of his ability, so then there's a decrease in this divine energy that comes into the world, and that's called his Gabrus Hadin. That's like turning off the faucet or decreasing the amount of energy coming in, like closing up a dam, preventing the flow of energy. So that's what's happening here in response to this person's sort of disdain or lack of excitement, enthusiasm for learning Torah. Ve'adam asher adayin lo ra'a or haTorah miyamav. If there's a person who's not yet perceived the light of Torah during his whole life, he's foreign to Torah. V'lo asak ba me'olam eine zoiche klal shetishra lav kedusha elyoina. That's sort of, I mean, I think it's obvious that Limud Torah is the greatest way to connect up with God. And so a person who's totally foreign to that, that he's totally ignorant, we say, Ein Am Haaretz Chassid. There's no way to be close to God without learning Torah. So if this person has never learned Torah in his whole life, so certainly he's going to be lacking in this connection. He calls it here, Hashras Kedusha El Yoina. The highest Kedusha will certainly not dwell upon him. Ve'enu Zoiche L'Nefesh Tahira. He will fail to merit a purity of soul. Zohar, Pekudei Chamisha, B'Haikra Eis Ba'Tlas, Pekudin Chad Mili B'Araisa, Tikad Barnash Lo Isasik B'Araisa, Leisle Nafsha Kadisha, Kedusha de La'ela Lo Shari Alave. So he brings a source for that idea from the Zohar that if a person is not involved in Torah learning, there's no way that he can have a really pure and holy soul, because Torah learning is the most fundamental energy and form of connection to Hashem. So if a person has never been exposed to learning or not involved in learning, there's no way that they could have full kedusha in their soul. וגם אם הוא משולח ונעזב חס ושלום לכוחos הדין של הסטרא אחרא, שהוא יכול לשלוט עליו, and also he is cast off. So again, by missing out on Torah, one is exposing himself to a disconnection from God. K'moshe Amru Razal Per Kamad Brachos, Kol Mi She'efshar Lo Lasok B'Torah Ve'eno Oisek. If a person has the capacity, he's like in yeshiva but wasting his time or not really studying, something like that. He has the opportunity to learn, but he doesn't do so. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevi alav yisurin mechuarim v'oichin oiso shenemar achsheiti mitov ka'evi ne'echar. So Hashem brings on him some bad times and some trouble. Ume'avid toiva harbe mimenu mikol ha'olam, and he's losing out on great good, and not only for himself but for the whole world. Ki hichriach chas v'shalom es atzmo v'es kol ha'olam lekaf choiv. So again, this is very adverse behavior to turn away from the Torah, and it's bad for him. It's bad for the whole world. K'ma'amaram zal b'dvarim rabba reish perek dal shim'u v'al tigba'u shimu divrei Torah v'al tigba'u v'al tagbiu es ha'toiva milabu la'olam. Don't miss out. Don't miss out on learning. Don't miss out on all the goodness that will come to the world if you do the learning. V'kein amru perek basra she'in puranos bala olam el b'shvil amei haaretz. When does paranus, bad things, come to the world? As a result of ignorance of Torah. V'im chas v'shalom yavo paranus al eze adam o medina avilu b'ktsas ha'olam dein garma delei chas v'shalom harachman yizbach shmo yatzilenu. So, yes.
So when this was written, there were yeshivot, but nothing like, in terms of numbers that we have today of Talmidim, right? They
True.
were really small, represented probably a very, very small percentage of the population of, let's say, able-bodied men that were, you know, could had the potential, I guess, if they had enough money or motivation.
True.
So what he's trying to recruit more people.
Um, I think he's speaking to people. He's writing in. We're speaking about the Reb Chaim Volozhin. He's the father of the yeshivas, right? He created the yeshiva in Volozhin, which is really the father of yeshivas. And he's trying to motivate people to study, and people that do have the wherewithal, the ability to study. Maybe they spent some time in yeshiva and now they're at a more advanced stage in life, and
Mm.
he's trying to impress upon them the importance of continuing their learning, growing and learning, and not abandoning their learning. So and he's also trying to fundraise to raise money for the yeshiva. He spent, significant amount of his energy traveling around and raising money to grow the yeshiva and to bring bakrim and to fund that. So he's his message is that Talmud Torah is really central to everything that Klal Yisrael does on an individual level and on a national level. So I agree with you that today, particularly after the Holocaust and the rebuilding of Klal Yisrael through the Gedolim, the few survivors, Rav Aaron Kotler and some of the Rebbes, the Gur Rebbe and the Belzer Rebbe, and so forth, um, and 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 Ramosha Feinstein and that generation, the Stipler and so forth, from the Chazon Ish. So they rebuilt Klal Yisrael and very much centered around Olam HaYeshivas, so that the world today of Olam HaYeshivas, both in Lakewood in America, in Baltimore, and in Israel, in Bnei Brak and Yerushalayim, so the yeshivas play a hugely central role in the essence of the Haredi community and the Olam HaTorah and the identity of that community to a degree that they never did. There's no way that in the time of the Chavetz Chaim, right, who he died in 1933, but like you said, the percentage of Bakrim that were able to go to yeshiva was much, much lower because Klal Yisrael was poor and just trying to survive. And today, Klal Yisrael, by and large, is wealthy.
Yeah.
There's tremendous Jewish wealth and even from wealth that supports Olam Yeshivas. There's a government both in America and in Israel who also puts money into the yeshivas. So there's really a new phenomenon of widespread Torah study throughout the community. And since you brought it up and we're thinking about it, and he's talking here about, the downside of not learning and the positive impact of yes learning, I'll tell you what I believe in my heart of hearts, and I think it's almost incontrovertible, and that is what happened on October 7th, um, with the Hamas coming in through the southern border. And what we found out now and later, as Tzahal went into Lebanon, and how ready the Hezbollah was ready to do the same thing on the northern border. And they were totally ready for what they called Mivtzat HaGalil. They were ready to take over the Galilee, which was to come in and murder and pillage and do all the things that were done in the South. But they had a quite a specific plan, and it included going to, the Air Force bases and taking over, you know, they wouldn't know how to fly the planes of the Air Force bases. But if you just put a grenade, to a plane, you could make the plane unflyable. Think how much destruction you could do with relatively small explosives. What would have happened if, as planned, the Hezbollah would have come into Israel on October 7th or 8th, or, at the very beginning, if they would have come full force, as they had planned and really committed to do? There was commitment between that the Iranians had organized between the forces of evil to really destroy the modern state of Israel in a day. And there's no good explanation why that didn't happen. Okay. whether the Russians were in on it and they told Hamas to get started or whatever you're going to say. And I'm not going in too deep into geopolitics, but what I want to say is it is the koyach of the Torah. It's obviously not the koyach of Tzahal that defended the northern border because they didn't defend the southern border because they didn't expect this to happen. They lived with a conceptia. They had a concept that they're not going to do anything bad to us. So it wasn't military preparations that saved the northern border, which was really saving the state of Israel on that day. So what saved us? So my answer is Simchas Torah. It was Simchas Torah. It was the amount of Torah, the unprecedented amount of Torah that we have in Eretz Yisrael. The yeshiva bakrim that were dancing on that day and celebrating Matan Torah, and the koyach of Torah of all the Jews of Eretz Yisrael. That is a tremendous koyach of Torah, and that protected us on that day from essentially annihilation. So I agree with you that we're at a fascinating time in history where there's unprecedented limud Torah as a result, but part of that is a result of the work of Reb Chaim Volozhin. It comes from the Nefesh HaHaim. So he's at the very
Mm.
beginning of the movement, and we're living 200 years later into the movement of the growth of Talmud Torah throughout Klal Yisrael to an unprecedented degree. Like the Gemara says in the days of Chizkiyahu, they badku midan vad Beersheva v'loya tinoik v'tinoikes shaloya bekiyim behilchos tuma v'tara. So just like in those days, there was tremendous widespread Torah study. We live in a similar period of history. There is tremendous widespread Torah study throughout the modern state of Israel, and that's a huge schus for us. And even though there's a lot of things wrong with our society, but there's a lot of Torah, and that's a wonderful schus. So I think that's part of the result of what we're learning here tonight. So I'm going on. K'moshe Kaseh b'Zohar. Patek Rosh Hashanah. Eis lasois l'Shem heferu torasecha b'kol zimna d'oraisim miskayim ba'alma u'barnash mishtadlin ba. As the world exists, people are learning Torah. Kaviyachal kodshabrichu chadi. God rejoices ba'ovdi yadu, b'maisi yada, v'chadi be'almin kulu. God rejoices with the world that He created. B'shmaya v'arakaimi b'kiyumayu. And so there's a sustaining of the worlds, the heavens and the earth that God created because of the joy, the divine joy due to the limud of Torah. Ubishaita, the Yisrael misbatlin miraisa. On the other hand, if there's a time that the Jews are making bittul Torah, avoiding Torah study, kavayachol tashash chele, kavayachol, it weakens God's power. The kadein eis lasois lashem inun bnei alma tzadikaya dishtarun eis lon lechagra chartzin. They need to gird their loins. Ulemevad oivdin. The kashrin begin to kutshabrichu yiskativ b'hubet tzadikaya, because it is the righteous who will bear responsibility for leadership of leading the people in Torah study. My time begin to heferu terasecha v'lo mishtadli b'lam b'nei alma k'dikayos. Because if the people are not properly studying Torah, it's going to be bad for everybody. V'hachi bezimna di Yisrael mishtadu b'araisa hu eis mehem nusa mitakna b'tikuna miskashta b'shleimusa k'dikayos. When the Jews are studying Torah, it brings faith and tikkun and a beautification in shlemus as is proper. Ubezimna diyasom mispatli me'araisa. We're familiar with this duality from Parshas Bechukoisai. If the Jews are oiskim b'Torah in Bechukoisai telechu, then God will bring the rain and the blessing, and everything will be well for you. And if chas v'shalom timasu, if we'll go off the derech and avoid Torah study and embrace foreign culture, so that will lead to all bad things, including exile and destruction. What is it? What do we need to do? What's causing the bad? The fact that they abrogated the covenant of Torah study. Begin the isbatlu Yisrael letata in pisgamia raisa, that they were violating the Torah, ignoring the Torah, abandoning the Torah. Begin da hu eis hakikaima o salka o nachta begin hondi Yisrael. It's all everything is a function. In each moment, she's in the middle, is either elevated by or descends based on Israel's behavior. So the fate, the fortunes of the Jewish people are determined by the level of Torah study. And truly, the Jewish people today living in our land in Eretz HaKodesh, and we live relatively like kings. We live on a very high standard of living by international standards. I looked at the statistic that the per capita GDP of Israel is higher than the UK. Okay. Now, Israel was, of course, a colony of Great Britain in 1948, a colony, whatever. We were the British Mandate. And they said there's no way that this strip of land could support more than like 1.5 million or 2 million people. There's 10 million people here between Gaza and the Jordan River, and we live really, really well. And of course, Israel has worked really hard to drain the swamps and build a really strong economy. And you got to give credit where credit is due. But there's a bracha here. And this bracha comes from widespread Torah study and the Olam HaTorah that we're familiar with. The yeshivas, all kinds of yeshivas of Jews of all kinds, all different stripes, who are oiskim b'Torah yomam v'layla, and that's what's bringing a great bracha.
Hmm.
Kavayachal
At the
u'mitzvah.
same time,
Yes.
I would just say that, yeah, granted, yeah, we have a very significant GDP, but we are so more expensive than most other European countries. Um, you know, whether it be real estate. I mean, today I walked into Bigga, and I wanted to have a salad. They were charging 80 shekels for a salad.
Oy vey, oy vey.
What's in the salad? 80 shekels. It's insane. The
That is
prices are
insane.
insane here.
I hear
I
you.
had my
Okay.
car service today and ended up costing 1,800 shekels for the 60,000 kilometer service.
It's a lot of money. It
1,800
is true.
shekels. And
Life is
that
very
didn't include
expensive
the
here.
tires that they wanted to change. It's
Okay. Yes, life in Israel is sort of impossible. The cost of living here makes it, it's a miracle that we exist at all. So I'm with you on that. We're talking about God's connection to the Jewish people as a function of our Torah. Kaviyachol u'misrachek himenu yizbar k'mo shekasa b'zoyar. K'debar nash israchek mi'araisa. Rachoi kumi Kadosh Baruch Hu. Ki kuchabricha ve'oraisa chad. We're very familiar with that formulation that God in the Torah, there's a unity there, there is one. And so a person who's distant or distancing himself from the Torah is distancing himself from God. Ve'ashmira elyoina shela kedusha sar me'alav. And so a person turning away from the Torah will lose his protection. Sar me'alav ishtamodav v'nikar lekoiches hadin asher higbir ba'atzmo sheyuklu lishlot alav. Now he's in trouble. He's now has no protection. Bein bechayav k'masher kam the brachos amuval el v'kein isa b'mishlei rabta reish perak amr of tuvia kol amar ba'atzmo b'divrei Torah eno yachol lamod b'yom tzara shenemar yisrapisa b'yom tzara tsar kechecha. Tsar kochacha. And בפרק שתי הלחם, כל המשמר את התורה נשמסו משתמרס, וכל שאינו משמר את התורה, ואמר במדרש תהילים, אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא לישראל, אם שמרת את התורה, אני אשמור אותך, שנאמר, אם שמור תשמרון. So again, this contract, this covenant of Shmira Elyoina, the Jewish people being guarded by God. We have like a force field around us coming from the Koyach of the Torah. כי ידוע גם כן מאמרם ז"ל, בזמן שהכל כל ינקב, בבתי כנסיות ובתי מדרשים, אין ידי עשיו שולטויס. So when the Jewish people, the Kol Torah, the Kol of Tefillah and the Kol of Torah is going strong in the shuls and the Beis Midrash, the yeshivas, so then the hands of Esav are not able to hurt the Jews. Hakol Kol Yaakov Yadav Sholtos. So look at the word Kol Yaakov in this pasuk in Parshas Toldos is written chaser vav. So this word, instead of saying hakol, it could be like hakel. Lehakel is to lighten. And so if the kol Yaakov is lightened, there's less Torah, there's less tefillah. So then, az yadayim yedei Esav, then the hands of Esav are given shlita. That's a very dangerous time. Va'amru b'vayikra b'dvarim rabba hasayif hasefer nitnu mekurachim. You have a famous Maimer Chazal that the Saif, the sword, and the Sefer came down from the heavens wrapped in one another. Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, im shemartem mashikasu b'Sefer atem nitzoilim min hasayif. If you're involved in the book, then you'll be saved from the sword. But if not, then not. So very important connection between our fortunes, our worldly fortunes, and our connection to Limud Torah. Uba pischa eicha a Masaya Malchus Goizeres Gzeira Gzeirasam Etzlachas Bishashi Yisrael Mashlichin de Retar La'aretz. If the Jews are throwing away the Torah, so then the powers that be, the temporal powers, the Malchios, are able to make Gzeiras against us. Harod Iksiv et Savatin Aten Alatamid Bepesha Bepsha'a Shel Torah. Kol Zman Shiyisrael Mashlichin de Retar La'aretz Malchus Gzeirasam Etzlecha Shenemer Batashrich Emes Arza. Ein Emes Ele Torah. Im ishlachta divrei Torah la'aretz, miyad itzlicha malchus, hareu deksiv astav itzlicha. So the antagonism of the umos ha'olam, the goyim, have a natural antagonism to the Torah, to the Jewish people. We're foreigners wherever we are, including in Israel, right? They say we're colonizers. We're foreign. We came and conquered someone else's land. So there's an antagonism to the Jewish people and our culture and our Torah. So they're going to make gzeiros against us. So the question is, are their gzeiros going to be matzliach, or is Hashem going to foil their plans? And the answer is, it depends on us. If there's a koyach of Torah, so then their plans will be foiled. But if chas v'shalom, the Jews are throwing away the Torah, if are taking a stand against the Torah, are taking moves to try to destroy the olam Torah, so then that's going to give hatzlacha to the goyim who are anti-Torah.
It seems like his
Yes.
seems like his emphasis is obviously on Torah study as a Torah rather than mitzvot or even supporting Torah institutions or Bate Knesset or Bate Midrashot. And most of what he brings down, it seems to me, could be Torah study, but at the same time it could be keeping the Torah. Most of what he brings down.
Okay.
As kind
so
of
you
proof.
Yeah, I hear ya. He has brought languages of the Zohar, ishtadlu be'oraisa, la'i be'oraisa. These are words that are used for amelus b'Torah, toiling in the Torah. So I
Yeah.
think those do, refer to the study of Torah by scholars and the importance of that act. And again, that is the premise of the Nefesh HaHaim, that Talmud Torah keneged kulam. And it's important to keep the Torah. It's important to support the Torah. But what's truly beloved by Kadosh Baruch Hu is limud Torah. So that's definitely his premise. So I mean, and you're challenging if his sources really say that. I think that there are sources, and that his sources do support that. But you're absolutely right that everybody has a role to play in it. Not everybody's going to be a Talmid Chacham, and there's a role for everybody to fulfill the Torah and to support the limud Torah. So that's for sure true. Va'amru sham od matzinu shaviter HaKadosh Baruch Hu al avodah zara gili arayis and shvichas damim. This is such a powerful statement of Chazal that God. They use the word viter. Okay, viter is like usually to overlook, or I'm mivater, I forgive you, or I'm willing to overlook something. And so here it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mivater on the Gimel Chamurais, on the three most, the worst Averas of Avodah Gilui Arayis Shvichus Damim, Velo Viter al Ma'asa Shel Torah. but he was unwilling to overlook the rejection of the Torah. Shenamar al ma avda haaretz al avodas kochavim gilura al avodas kochavim gilura shvichus damim ein ksiv kan. It doesn't say that the Jewish people lost their hold and their civilization in ancient Israel because of avodas gilura shvichus damim. Ela vayomer Hashem. Why did they lose it? Al ozvam es Torasi. But they lost it because they rejected his Torah. So, I mean, we do say elsewhere that the first temple was destroyed for Gilurai Shvichas Damim and Avodah
Yeah.
Zarah. So this is a
This is
particular
Yirmiyahu.
mimer. Yes, this is Yirmiyahu. In this pasuk where Hashem uses the Shloshen al ozvam es Torasi. They rejected my Torah. Let's just look at that pasuk.
But then it doesn't seem to be specifically referring to Torah study per se. I'm not,
Um,
keeping the Torah. It could
okay.
would fall under that as well, I would think.
Okay, valid point. It is here. Vayomer Adonai al azvam es toirasi asher nasati lifnehem velo shamu bekoili velo halchu ba. So yeah, it has halicha b'Torah, which could be a lifestyle of Torah, but also a learning of Torah, right? Like we said in B'chukoisai telechu. Rashi says maybe in B'chukoisai telechu means keeping the mitzvahs. Talmud Loimar, it says Vasisa mitzvosai. So this must be a melim b'Torah. So I agree that in Pshat, that there's room to say this is the abandonment of the Torah lifestyle, the abandonment of the teachings of the Torah. In Drash, this is recognized terminology for halicha b'Torah is the study of Torah. So I do think it's here in the text of Yirmiyahu. Now he talks about Tanabel Yo Sham Borei Kamagodol Koyach Pisha'a Shel Torah Shelo Charva Yerushalayim Velo Charva Beis Hamikdash Elo BePish'a Shel Torah. Observe how great is the power of sinning against the Torah, for Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash were destroyed for no other reason than sinning against the Torah. Ubitanchuma. It's impossible for the Jews to live. Ella imkein misaskim b'divrei Torah. Ulefi shepirshu Yisrael midivrei Torah. Lefichach hasoine ba lehem. V'keinat moitze she'ena soine ba. Ella yidei rifyin yadayim min Torah. This is something we recognize from Parshas Beshalach, that Vayechanu beRefidim, the Jews were in Refidim, and Chazal Darshan, the name of the place Refidim is because there was a Rifyan Yadayim b'Torah. And then the next pasuk says Vayavo Amalek. When did Amalek, when did the Soine, the enemy, come up against them and have some power to hurt them, to harm them? It was a result of Rifyan Yadayim in a Torah. So this is a really important point. Again, it's the essence of the Nefesh HaHaim and the society which has been created as a result of this approach, which goes back to the Vilna Gaon. It's the Olam HaTorah, it's the Olam Yeshivas. It's I want to share with Steve and with Jay that this past week, Reb Daniel invited me to his house for a Siyum Masechtas Eruvin, and it took him 8 years to learn it. So you can imagine how much toil there was in learning a
Mhm.
hard Masechta like Eruvin over 8 years, Baruch Hashem. So that kind of simcha, that celebration of Torah, of grown men involving themselves in Torah study and making it a big part of their lives, and then celebrating. There was a beautiful Fleischig meal, and the wives were all there. It was a really nice party. I was totally inspired by the event. It was so beautiful. And that's the kind of power of Klal Yisrael, that we embrace the Torah, we love the Torah, we work hard to understand the Torah, and we celebrate a completion of a tractate. God loves that. That brings more godliness into the world. That shines bright light. That brings protection and blessing on the whole Jewish people. And if people, I once met a doctor in Haifa. I knew his son, and his wife passed away, and I went to his house, and I made a certain comment about something from the Gemara. I said, the Talmud says kach v'kach, and he says, Eineni yodea b'Talmud shum davar. He sort of was like, I'm happy not to know anything about Talmud, you know? He had a very arrogant and secular attitude and of disdain and sort of hatred for the Talmud and rabbinic Judaism. And he was a Jew who had become estranged from his Yiddishkeit. And it was like the culture of Jewish Haifa. And I mean, there's some wonderful Jews in Haifa. I don't mean to badmouth the whole city, but I'm just saying that there's a secularist bent there. And and Jews who are, disdainful and turning away from the Torah, it's really bad for us. It's bad for Klal Yisrael. It gives power to the enemy. It causes the soina to rise up against us and have their way. So I just conclude with Musar and with Bracha that by embracing the Torah and continuing to learn the Torah with a brand, with all our koyach and with the love and excitement and putting in the extra effort to understand the words of Torah, this brings great bracha on the Jewish people. It helps us defend ourselves against our enemies and will bring us ultimately to the great light. Thanks,
Amen.
everybody.
Koyach.
Broken to you. Thanks
Shikoach,
for being
Daniel.
here. Nice to be back together. Take care. Chodesh Tov, everybody.
Chodesh
Kodesh
Tov.
Tov.